And good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode Around the Fire tonight. My name is Fred Govea from New York City, and I'm super thrilled to welcome a dear friend from the West Coast, for some, the better coast, Mark Carlos. Welcome, Mark. Good evening.
Thank you, Fred. Welcome.
Or I should say good afternoon for you over there, 4 p.m. Pacific time, right?
Yes, sir.
I can see some glare coming from behind that piano through the windows. Good
We
to
are
have some
still
sun.
sunny. We are
Yeah.
still sunny.
Over here, it's already pitch black as we would have it on a late fall, early winter time of the year, but it's all good. So for those that are joining us for the first time, friends, welcome to Spirit Reflections. It's a channel that was started during the pandemic, and we bring guests that are artists, scientists, spiritualists, people from all walks of life to share their personal journey and also the spiritual journeys that may have brought them to where they are today, the work that they do. And we invite you to participate with your questions, with your comments. And the idea is that we huddle around this mythical fire and always harking back to those ancient times of our history when we were small communities of tribes, hunter-gatherers, and we relied on each other for friendship, for survival, for mutual support. And at the end of our days, we would sit around the fire in nature and look at this beautiful starlit sky that we see here in the back, and look at each other through the light of the fire, and ask ourselves, where are we today? Where do we come from? Where we are going? So the channel is meant to evoke these reflections, hence the name Spirit Reflections. And tonight's topic is a really interesting one. I'd say very current, especially given that we just finished a presidential election that the entire world stopped to watch and to witness. And I wanted to introduce our friend Mark tonight. I will read the bio that he sent me, which is very short, but we're going to get more in depth about Mark as a person first. So, Spiritism found Mark in 2018, and he continues his journey of enlightenment and progress each day. He retired from a career in technologies, and he's the father of 2 adult sons. He's now in the service to others while he grows his spiritual knowledge. So, thank you for your service here tonight, Mark. And let's see, tell us a little bit more about this personal journey of yours that got you to where you are today before we get to the topic.
So there is no doubt that in my 60 plus years of living, I have, as an American, experienced pride in a variety of ways. But it wasn't until Spiritism and the impact of Spiritism that I truly began to assess what pride has meant to me during my life. And so today's presentation will be as humble as I can be, and yet as revealing as I can be, as I express my opinions of the last 60 plus years of living in this country, and more importantly, what I have learned from it and what I think the future holds.
Very nice opening. I forgot that we have an opening vignette, so I will put that while we welcome our friends that are joining us. So this goes the official vignette, Mark, and then we go back to you.
Okay.
All right, we're back after this Debussy soothing vibe. You are a musician too, right, my friend?
Absolutely. That sang to me. That put me right in the proper frame.
So tell us a little bit about you, Mark.
Well, there's a number of elements of my life that are in the final slides of this presentation.
Oh, okay.
I can certainly talk about myself rather eloquently because I have these 60 years of pridefulness and public speaking.
Okay.
But I'm going to defer a lot of that personal information until its appropriate point in the presentation.
Sounds good. Then we can get right to the actual topic, American pride and its impact.
Very good.
Shall we share the screen?
Yes, please.
All right. And guys, feel free to ask any questions, make your comments here in the chat, and we'll make it as interactive as possible. All right.
Okay, so pride is a, shall I say, misunderstood word. And I'd like to begin by setting the table of understanding as to how pride is defined. So Wikipedia calls it an emotional state deriving positive effect from the perceived value of a person or thing, which the subject has an intimate connection. And this emotional state may be inwardly or outwardly directed. So notice I've highlighted the word positive. And I did that intentionally because this is where much of the confusion of the concept of pride and all of its related elements, such as ego, can absolutely be confusing to the human. Because Merriam-Webster gives us both positive and negative interpretations of the word. The quality of or state of being proud, such as, in a negative sense, conceit or an inordinate quantity of self-esteem. But in a positive manner, a reasonable or justifiable self-respect. Also in a positive manner, pride can be a delight or elation arising from an act, possession, or even relationship. And an example is parental pride. And then we flip to a negative perspective, where pride is disdainful behavior or treatment, an ostentatious display, excessiveness. So you can see there can be confusion. Now, in my lifetime, and I'll just say I was born in the 50s, intelligent adolescent in the 60s, well, semi-intelligent, and a child of the 60s, especially from California.
That's right. You're in the epicenter.
And so the West Coast pride as a component of the American pride, I look back and I realize it's in my country's DNA. I was raised with black and white TV. And when TV began in this country, pride was one of the most common themes besides comedy. So again, we realize that pride historically and today has multiple meanings. We've talked about some of these examples. You can have pride in your country as Americans want to have pride in their country. But we can also show inappropriate, excessive behavior, individually or as a group. We in America have evolved societally and personality-wise because of how pride is taught, how pride is communicated in this country. In the last 20, 30 years, we have the entire movement of sexual preference. And it is referred to in a prideful manner, as it should. For humans should not be anything but full of pride about who they are as they learn to know themselves. We have pride that has evolved from our countries of origins. African Americans, American Indians, Latinos from multiple countries, Asians from multiple countries, all have pride in carrying their country's heritage to this country. In my lifetime, both of these bullet points appeared in the form of school clubs in high school. It was a time in the 60s when we were free to express and evolve. And this was one prideful manner in which American high school students and college students, young people and full-fledged adults, pridefully took their stance. But through it all, we are unsure if pride is okay or not. Here are just some iconic examples of posters, poster art. It's a very public reality. We humans love to tell each other how proud we are. How proud we are of ourselves, how proud we are of our families and friends, how proud we are of our passions. We're proud. Our lives on earth are full of pride, and they manifest through multiple generations. Knowledge is advanced. Prideful knowledge is advanced through science and self-promotion. You know, it's hard to imagine an Albert Einstein caring at all about being the scientist, the genius that he was. He could care less about his self-promotion. What he cared about was his work. He was extremely prideful of his work. And he taught an entire generation to also be prideful of their work. Now, the generations aspect for me personally, and you'll hear more about this later, directly relates to the fact that I have two sons who are now adults, and how their pride shows itself from having observed their parents and other adults through their growing years. Again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. Our countries usually promote pride in heritage and achievement, and the countries throughout the world are taught directly and indirectly this heritage, this element of history that makes them who they are as a country and as a people of that country. I had the luxury, the privilege of visiting Rwanda in the early 2000s. 4 years after a horrific genocide. What struck me was how the population was prideful that they are recovering, that they were recovering, they were committed to recovery, and they were committed to peace. And it was evident through all the surviving generations. And yet, it was indeed a horrific genocide that they lived through. How their pride in their country was renewed is stunning. It's amazing. Families promote pride through achievements. And in America in particular, the entire family feeds off of the image that they have of themselves when one or multiple members of the family are successful. The family who is first generation American and raises a child, and for the first time in that family's heritage, they have a college graduate. They have a first-time American college graduate in their family history. It makes them feel prideful. Of course, they all feed off that common emotion. I can tell you that high school graduation for both of my sons was more than just a check mark of something to accomplish in their early life. It was an absolute accomplishment. It was a success. Both of them overcame some significant hurdles to achieve that.
Definitely.
And as a parent, I'm extremely proud that they did. Commercially, America loves to promote pride. I just went to Amazon and started capturing images with the word pride. And you can see we have quite a variety of commercialization of the word. We have book titles. We have books that became movies. We have books that come from well-respected authors of plays. And then we have the commercialization of a prideful tangent, such as the rainbow images, such as a country's brand new flag, such as kitty litter. And there's a lot more. But it's interesting how Madison Avenue, the marketing arm of commercialization, uses pride, promotes pride, and again, promotes it in a positive manner, even though humans are confused about, is pride good or isn't it? And here's two clips that came to me unsolicited. Opportunities for me to use my last name and pridefully wear my own logos. And no, I have not purchased these. I just captured the images. So I do want to take a bit of history in today's presentation, and I'm going to begin with Shakespeare. So there's no question of the impact of Shakespeare's master works throughout the millennia. But isn't it interesting that pride was one of his favorite topics? From As You Like It, from The Merchant of Venice. And he did not only use the word, but he wrote with an unmistakable aspect of talking to the word. And rank me with the barbarous multitudes. How dare you? From Henry VI and from Henry VIII, a continued dialogue about pride and about those characters where pride was excessive. Richard II, who was a pompous king, as the play would have him be. I have no need to beg. I'm above that. I love this one. He that is proud eats up himself. Pride in his own glass, his own trumpet, his own chronicle. Wow. I do hate a proud man as I do hate the engendering of toads. And vanity, one of Shakespeare's favorite topics that he wrote about mostly indirectly unless he was writing about how vain people overextended themselves. He wears his tongue in his arms. Gosh, that statement is so interesting. I wonder what the real source of that is.
Right.
And then, of course, we have Spiritist literature. Now, again, this is historical in nature. And this first slide are quotes from the Gospel. And in chapter 7 and again in chapter 9, Kardec has written specifically about pride.
Yep.
Pride, the root of all your troubles. You are so full of pride. If you bury yourself in pride, how much you will have to lament.
Yeah, in the Spirits book, did they say how pride has destroyed so many humanities? Not just civilizations, but entire humanities.
That is exactly
Pretty bold
right.
statement.
Very bold statement. Now, Kardec did not stop with the gospel.
Right.
Kardec also wrote in Genesis, and of course in the Spirits book, with direct references to pride. And this statement in Genesis, pride has influenced man to say that all animals were created for his purposes and for his needs. Oh my gosh. This statement, when I read it again this morning, it just jumps out at me because, and I'm going to speak very candidly, to have come through for the last 4 years with the president of the most powerful country on earth, or one of them, to take liberties with the environment, to take liberties with animals, and not just in this country, but to take liberties that impact the entire world. It is unbelievable. It's unconscionable. And one of the greatest challenges facing the earth and this country is to correct the wrongs, and how long the correcting of those wrongs will take, right, because of how significant the wrongs are.
Right.
And I would just say, I will extend that statement to include American pride. Because whatever American pride was through most of my life, it is no longer. It is something completely different. In fact, the pendulum has swung. So many Americans now have disgust, not pride. But back to the word and back to Spiritism. Because pride stems from selfishness. Pride stems from a single-minded, me-first mindset. And that is, in my mind, the clearest indication that pride is, in fact, a negative. It is a drug that can easily become something far more than what we can control. The Spirits book has multiple references in its moral laws to the impact of pride at the point of death. The impact of pride as reflections on the life lived takes place, and reflections of pride in the willingness to move forward. It shows itself in a variety of different ways in Spiritist literature. And I'm going to stop here and simply say that I find this extremely fascinating, but it is so new to me. I am still very much in my infancy of learning. But make no mistake about it, I'm completely sensitive to it. And of course, Spiritism literature is not singularly Kardec's. He codified it directly from the elevated spirits through the mediums. And the mediums and the spirits have continued to work together to communicate the negative nature of pride, including Divaldo and Chico, with the spirits Joanna de Angelis and Andre Luis. And there are more.
Many more. And in fact, I do want to jump in, if you allow me here, Mark, because I think this would be a great moment to share this book that the U.S. Spiritist Federation
Yes.
recently published,
Yes.
which, as you know, Kardec compiled for 12 years of his life as a Spiritist, later in his life, periodicals and journal scientific articles called the Spiritist Review. And they are an amazing sort of behind the scenes communications, correspondence, hypotheses, theories, speculations in the entire world that he corresponded with, including Russia, North America, Europe. And the Spiritist Federation has compiled this amazing book, which is selected materials from these 12 years of monthly publications that only included spiritual phenomena and articles and information that took place in the United States. So for all of us who study Spiritism and who like to learn about the spiritual history of the United States, here is an amazing book to have. They have them available on Amazon at the USSF bookstore for both the Kindle electronic edition as well as the print version. That's one I highly recommend. And then the second one, Mark, which we talked about recently and came to me through a friend, is this book, which is available on Amazon for purchase and also for free from Google Books, because it's from 1851. This is pre-Kardec, 1852, called Voices from the Spirit World, Communications from Many Spirits by this man who was a medium named Isaac Post. This book is fantastic, not only because the level of the messages and the content of the messages is so earth-shattering, revolutionary, but the spirits who signed these messages include the founding fathers like George Washington, the first president of the U.S., Benjamin Franklin, and others. So it's such a great companion piece for us to study alongside the books of Spiritism. So just wanted to put that out there for you, friends. Okay, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred. Thank you. So we are facing, in my perspective, both a reality and a challenge. Kardec codification was only 170 years ago. We are still in our infancy. And while Spiritism existed before that, it is really only 170 years of having the foundation from which these beliefs emanate from. As Fred just pointed out, there are still books being translated into English. There are many books published in both French and Portuguese that have yet to find their way into English, for whatever reasons. It is an amazing time on the planet right now, for there's a volume of materials yet to be communicated to the language that populates this earth more than any other language. And so there's a pride that gets in the way of these translations. And we get back to this challenge of pride becoming confusing. Until humans become re-educated and learn to put pride in its proper perspective. I believe we Spiritists own the responsibility for communicating pride to all of humanity. Our inner circles and everywhere. And the communicating, of course, is not just words spoken or written, but in actions. I challenge myself to stop being the prideful person I've been for all of my life. That doesn't happen easily. Pride is this double-edged sword. We know it's got good elements and bad elements. So here's some questions for all of you. Is it natural and can it be appropriate to feel good about being successful? How do you handle success? How do you communicate it? For certain, it is unnatural and inappropriate to be overboard when you are successful, visibly, audibly, emotionally. Sharing your good feelings with the world in order to impress or influence others. Hey, look at me. Look what I did. Look what I was able to accomplish. There's no benefit. There's no benefit. Okay, so I'm going to get a little personal now, more personal, and talk about me. Remember, I am a new Spiritist. I'm 68 years old. My parents were the first Americans in their lineage, both of them. My mother comes from an Italian background, my father from a Portugal background. Whoops, sorry. There went my presentation mode. Come on. All right. So early in my education, I'm going to say probably third grade, elementary school, I began to hear from both my parents, Mark, you can do anything your heart desires. And so, as a normal growing child, I became involved in sports. I got involved in music. I got involved in the things that appealed to me from as a youth, from Boy Scouts to whatever, because I can do anything if I really want to. No limits. That mindset I carried throughout my entire life. I have limits. It's entirely up to me. So I had 60 years of unconscious pride that in fact at times became so out of control, it didn't even fluctuate. It just ran amok consistently, no matter what I accomplished or failed at, no matter what I won or lost, no matter what I tried and completed or tried and gave up. Unconscious pride. In a professional sense, I've had a wonderful career and I'm now retired, and it's great to look back. But I look back with an interesting perspective. Professionally, I was often in management. I led other teams, and I did a good job of being a team leader. We achieved goals and objectives, made good money, and we promoted the pride of ourselves and our team. Not necessarily in a competitive manner, but certainly in a feel-good motivational manner. So much so that I look back now and I realize my personal pride was inflated to extremes because of my team. I carried myself professionally in an excessive manner, and it showed itself.
Mark, there's something rattling in the background. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the
Don't
wire that's touching
don't
the
know, but
microphone or
I
something.
just moved. So, okay.
Okay, it stopped.
It probably the wire.
Maybe that's what it was.
At any rate, It is easy to look back now, 2 years into my Spiritist journey, and have an objective perspective of my past. Because it did change when Spiritism found me. God decided it was time. My future is therefore forever changed. I know this beyond a shadow of a doubt. And whatever I thought about my past, it simply doesn't look the same anymore. I'm definitely a forever work in progress. And that in itself is a challenge, because I don't know how many years I have left on this planet, but I do know there's another incarnation coming. So let me talk a little bit more about me and my past to try to put this pridefulness in perspective. So as I said, Americanism is the promotion of pride in all its forms. In fact, it's written as such in the US Constitution. So earlier, Fred spoke about distinguished founders of this country, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, etc. In reality, these early US politicians, the founders of our country, the creators of these documents that are now who we are as a country, they were openly concerned that without morals and virtues, over time, individual and collective freedoms can become compromised. So in my lifetime, I have seen this occur. When I read what George wrote in his farewell address, it is stunning. And if you want to do some interesting research as an American, I encourage you to read George Washington's farewell address, for it was never delivered verbally. He left his role as president and published in print his farewell address. It is a powerful document. It includes references to pride. American pride, democratic pride, and the open alert that without self-control, pride can run amok. So again, it was instilled at me at an early age. And I began supporting the USA indirectly, not necessarily conscious of what I was doing. So you already heard I became a musician early on. I was in parades all the time. I performed in concerts all the time. In fact, up until my 50s, I was still doing this. And one example of this is John Philip Sousa marches, which were the mainstay of patriotic American music on Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day parades, etc. I went on to march with and instruct multiple marching bands and drum and bugle corps. And I look back on this time and this effort, and what I realize is I was promoting pride every step of the way. I was teaching young people, children, how to be a team member, how to be uniform in their uniforms, in their formations, with their music, and to take pride in doing the best job possible. And let's talk about voting. Because in my lifetime, I had to wait till I was 21 to vote. And I've been voting since the 76 election, considering it my American duty. This year of 2020 this American duty took an entirely different spin. This role of being an American citizen and voting carried more importance in this election than in any other one in my lifetime. And when I look back, politically speaking, the military reality of my early adulthood was the Vietnam War. I was blessed to be a college student. I had a built-in deferment. And then they created what is called the lottery in 1971. And all of a sudden, student deferment didn't matter anymore. And there are 356 birthdays in a year. They put 356 dates in a hat, and they started drawing. And on an August day in the summer of 1971, I huddled around a transistor radio with two other 19-year-olds, and we listened to our birth date being called. The first 120 were going to the Army. The next 60 were potentially going. My birthday came up 351st. I was not drafted. But the truth is, had I been drafted, I would have served my country. I would have taken that musical background, I would have put on a uniform, and I'd have been part of the USO band. Somewhere. I would not have carried a rifle. I would not have seen action. That's my belief. And then we have my family, my sons, my parents, the mother of my sons, my sister, and a whole lot of relationships. A whole lot of relationships. I didn't become a father until I was 45. I got a lot of selfishness out of my system before becoming a father. I was able to then do a better job in my 40s than I would have in my 20s at putting my family first.
Beautiful.
But it still wasn't as good as it could have been. But I ask myself today, how can family pride be wrong? The feeling I have looking at these pictures of my sons, my parents, my sister, my ex, it's a prideful feeling. How can that be wrong? Well, I'm going to talk about something now that is very real. This is a 2020 enlightening statement. Through my life, I have had a sense of superiority and entitlement as an American male. Said another way, privileged, white, American male. For 68 years, I lived that completely unconsciously. And in 2020, consciousness changed my perspective on being a white, privileged American male.
Is there an earthquake happening there in the West Coast? What's that?
That's a jet flying overhead.
Okay, good.
I never realized the wrongness of the combination of what this means. I had a life of entitlement, believing I was better than everyone else, better than non-Americans, better than non-whites, and certainly better than females. And that's the impact of pride. As I heard directly at the end, that I have an ebb and flow of my personality disorders. Prideful, arrogant, pompous, cocky, fat-headed, disrespectful, and a whole lot more that probably...
And more.
But again, I just state that in 2020, the light bulb went on. The enlightenment has occurred. The awareness is very present. The corrective actions are still a work in process. You don't just change 60 years of thinking and acting overnight. There's an awful lot to learn and undo. So I have this old life and this new life, learning from my past mistakes, specifically interpersonal relationships. And in my short time with Spiritism, I now actively, on a daily basis, and by the way, because I'm retired, this is not just a casual effort, this is a serious effort to be in service and to be in education. I am absolutely dedicated to continued self-analysis and self-improvement. And I restrict myself as best I can to teaching others on only those topics where it's not about me. Except this presentation, because this is definitely about me.
That's right.
So what's in your future? If you've sat through this presentation, undoubtedly some of what I've said and shown has rung true for you. And you've done your own self-analysis. Excuse me. Come on. Remember that a part of the definition is a delight or elation arising from some act, a reasonable or justifiable self-respect, a positive effect from the perceived value of a person or thing. These are the positives. What makes you feel prideful today? Your job? The fact that you survived to this point? The fact that you're making a difference, not only in your life, but in other people's lives? What is it that makes you feel prideful? What will make you feel prideful in the future? Not just given what I've planted in the way of mental seeds today, but also as you continue to struggle with this dual-edged sword of pride. How will you feel prideful in the future? Because the rest of the definition is the extremes. Inordinate conceit, disdainful behavior, ostentatious display. How will you prevent your pride from becoming excessive? How will you manage your pride? And in particular, if you have a string of successes, how do you manage your pride? How do you prevent yourself from pridefulness becoming excessive? I'm going to suggest to you, you have an accountability partner, someone you can trust, who will point out to you your pridefulness when it becomes excessive. This could be a significant other or spouse. This could be an adult child. This could be a parent. This could be a business partner. This could be a best friend. But I strongly recommend you find someone who will give you what you need, who will tell you what you need to hear. And that is the end, but certainly not the end of pride.
Nice. Nice. Thank you, Mark. Awesome presentation. It was great to learn more about you, you know. That's part of the beauty here and seeing the things that we share in common
Thank you,
and
Fred.
how you went through it. and the consciousness of bringing it to light in 2020 about the male, American male, white American male, which is new. And something that you mentioned also that resonated, that I remembered, about pride being instilled in the Constitution and the founding fathers worrying about running it amok. It's so part of our psyche, collective unconscious, that even one of the most famous patriotic songs, America the Beautiful, has in the lyrics that stanza, which is gives me the goosebumps every time. God meant thy in every flaw, confirm your soul in self-control, your liberty in law. Right?
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
You know, the other reference I would make, and again, we've already mentioned his name, is Ben Franklin's Virtues.
Yeah, the 13 Virtues, for sure.
The 13
Which
Virtues.
is beautifully disseminated throughout Spiritism. I like that. We've been doing a good job at that. Now, Mark has an interesting question for you. John has an interesting question for you, Mark. How was Spiritism introduced to you?
So I had moved to a temporary situation where I was renting a room in a house, and the house was on a large piece of property, and there were multiple houses on the property. And I came home one night late from work, and sitting out in the field on this property was this lady on a blanket, and she had a candle. And I pulled up and I parked my car and I took my stuff inside and I walked back out to my car, and I looked over at her and she was waving me over. I had not met her. I knew she lived there on the property, but I went over, and Anna Paula introduced herself to me and asked me if I would like to sit down and meditate with her. She had just finished doing the gospel at home on a blanket out in the fields under the stars. I got introduced to the final prayer. That's what I said. That's what we said. She called it meditation. I didn't learn until later what it really was. But the final prayer was stunning. I'm a lifetime Christian, and so praying is not new to me. But what she prayed for and how she prayed was something I had not heard before. So that started the conversation. Next thing you know, I'm invited to a Spiritist center, and the rest is still evolving.
Cool story, right?
Yeah. Make no mistake about it. God decided, not me.
That's right. That's right, friends. No, and I do want to mention something that's coming up this week, friends, which is happening online, but it's something that is done every year, which is, oops, this is the wrong link, sorry, which is this event here that is hosted by the Long Island Spiritist Doctrine Studies in partnership with the Tri-State Spiritist Federation here on the East Coast, which is the Suicide Prevention Workshop. I'd like to definitely make sure we look at these. What's going on? It's not allowing me. Hold on a second. I know what to do. There we go. Wow, it's not allowing me. Okay.
Oh, do I have to stop sharing?
No, it's not you. I don't know what's going on my end, but I guess we'll have to leave it at that. Let me give it one last try, which is the Suicide Prevention Workshop in... Okay, it's not letting me share the screen, but it's going to be happening on the 21st of November, the 25th, and 28th of November. And you can look at it in the Tri-State Spiritist Federation's website, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as the Long Island Doctrine Spiritist Studies and Kardec Radio. They're all going to be giving the talks there. And it's a great event every year to remind us about the consequences of suicide and being a place of support for people that are at risk of suicide and the resources in our community. So I wanted to bring back to you, Mark, a couple of questions that came up for me during it. That as a immigrant that came here as a teenager, that I faced a lot of self-image issues in the beginning that brought me to a point of low self-esteem because I was perceived as an outsider who didn't know the language, who didn't know the culture. And even though I didn't suffer outright bullying, I was a bit isolated from my school for just because I was so different, right? And as I grew to learn and study Spiritism, you get to see that just like Rome, the United States has this broader mission of welcoming so many different cultures, absorbing so many different ethnicities and civilizations, and yet allowing them to thrive here in their own expressions. And even though sometimes they might get isolated in their own little ghettos of community and not necessarily mix in and acculturate with the broader US culture, it still gives them a place in the sun, right? And so I guess I'm mentioning all of this because it has been a welcoming place for me, despite the challenges in the beginning, and it continues to be for so many people. And I think the question becomes, as we enter a new phase in the history of the country with a new presidency and a new phase, how can we, as people who are studying Spiritism and spiritual philosophies, work on continuing to be this open arms, open, welcoming for people from all over the world, right?
Sure. The blending of American principles for conduct, shall we show it, in a blended sense with Spiritism principles. What is apparent to me is there's a segment of Americans who are absolutely conscious of and supportive of an open borders mindset. Anybody from anywhere in the world can come to America. We welcome them. We support them. We want them to do things the American way as much as possible, but we're very respectful of their individuality, of their cultural heritages. And I believe in my heart that's the majority of Americans. But the minority of Americans are far more vocal to not be like this, to express that, wait a minute, I'm American. You're taking a job from me. You're taking a place in college from my child. You are not giving me the respect as an American that I deserve because I was born here. Well, that was a mindset that might have had its place at one point in time, but doesn't anymore. I have a lifetime in technology, and my perspective is technology has brought the world closer. We are not separated by oceans and mountains. We are separated by how long it takes to log in.
Right.
That's it. As we are talking right now, 3,000 miles apart.
Right.
So we are communal now across the globe. There's no more territorialness.
Right.
So, again, I look at the last 4 years and I think, contrary to this technology reality, is the president who decided to try to build a wall between Mexico and the United States. Okay, isolationist mindsets are not new. People have been talking about that since the early 1800s, but it has no place. It has no place. The earth has evolved. America's still America, but it has no place. Isolationism has no place.
Yeah, it's just like the idea of consciousness that you said. It brought you to your consciousness in 2020 about this notion of being above others because you're American white male. And until then, you're acting on it, but you weren't aware of it.
Completely.
And there's an economist named Jeremy Rifkin who talks about the evolution of our consciousness collective and how it went from tribal to religious, from religious to ideological to national. So we have national consciousness. And then he says we enter into something called dramaturgical consciousness now, where we play a persona online. We have a social media persona that we display on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. We constantly feed that persona. So it's dramaturgical, it's drama. We're playing a persona. It's not who we are, it's not our life, but it impacts our real life. It affects our mental health, as we've seen with that documentary called Social Dilemma. And then he says we entering into, prompted by the young generation, into something called biosphere consciousness.
Right.
Where it's all about where does the food from my burger comes from? The cows? Well, they're my siblings. I cannot eat this. And these massive amounts of young people now who are reincarnating on the planet now, already with this biosphere consciousness, with this mindset that, for example, vegetarianism is something that we are going to have to adopt, not for religious reasons only, or for spiritual reasons, not only for environmental reasons, but just because it doesn't fit anymore, right? And other things like territory, like an idea of America being an idea separate from France being a separate idea. And as we have this technology that only separates us from a login speed, we start to break that to the point where even heads of state, as much as they are still very powerful, will maybe be less relevant on a day-to-day basis, right? I mean, I hope in the way that they influence us, at least, because we definitely need better role models. And here's hoping that those are already working in the silence, away from the loud speakers and spotlight, you know?
Agreed.
So if you were to have a dream, like no limitations of people, no limitations of resources, no limitations of time, what would you like to envision? That's your most beautiful dream that you see for the spiritual future that you can see in your lifetime in this country.
Wow.
To be within Spiritism or outside Spiritism or both?
My goodness. To take the top 10 issues facing the globe and try to figure out which one carries the most significance. I'm going to speak to the health of the planet. If there's one thing that I desire in my lifetime, it's a worldwide recognition that we cannot continue as we have been, that we must absolutely make some significant changes to our future. Whether you take up the mantle of electric cars versus fossil fuels, whether you take up the mantle of cleaning the ocean of all the plastics, whether you take up the mantle of moving to a plant-based food system, or whether you take the mantle of reducing the dependencies on pharmaceuticals, which is absolutely the worst vacuum of financial resources facing the globe right now. I think in any of those cases, putting the planet first allows humanity to not only survive, but to thrive. The greatest challenge facing humanity is to get over the hump of what can I do? So many people are facing this Herculean reality and say to themselves, I can't do anything. I can write a check to my favorite nonprofit. That's what I can do. I firmly believe there's a whole lot more. I firmly believe there's a whole lot more. So my prayers are for the planet, and humanity will get its act together.
Cool. Awesome. Mark, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom, your reflections around the fire here with us tonight. May it can be the continuation of other conversations that we can have, and recommending people to huddle around the fire with us as well and leave here more inspired to take the actions that they need to take. And as we're talking about fire, I think there's a fire happening outside because it smells like smoke. I need to verify what's going on if I have to evacuate my building. But it comes in good time because we're about to end the broadcast. But it does smell like fire outside. Friends, stay tuned to our next episodes and subscribe to our channel. And I'll end with in the best way we can, which is with music, Mark. I don't know if you've seen it, but I know you're gonna love it because it's around your time, your generation, 1969, The Age of Aquarius by the group Fifth Dimension, which just brings that mantra and very uplifting recommendation reminder to us. Let the sun shine in. Let the sun shine in. Big hug, my friend, from 3,000 miles away. Be well, be safe, and we'll see you guys soon. Till next time. Take care, everybody.
Take care.